Hi, and welcome to another F&D presentation. Today, we're going to be continuing our It's a Great I.D.E.A series with the rights of students with disabilities to the least restrictive environment, or the LRE. So welcome. My name is Sassafras Middleman. I'm glad that you're here today. I am a parent trainer here at the Family Network on Disabilities, and I'm glad that we can help do these trainings to get you parents where you need to be. I am a parent of a special needs child, and I understand how difficult it can be, and it is our greatest privilege to be able to help you with this. So a little bit about us. We are a nonprofit, a 501c3. We do not work with the the state's Department of Education. We do not work with the local school systems. Instead, we get a grant from the I.D.E.A, from the Office of Special Education Programs, to be the Parent Training and Information Center for the state of Florida. We are family driven and family centered. We were founded in 1985 when a group of us parents came together looking for resources and supports and information. And out of that, the Family Network on Disabilities was born. We are not attorneys, doctors, or mental health professionals, but instead, we give you the information, resources, and supports that you need to be the best advocate you can be for your child. Moving on to our topic, the I.D.E.A, or the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, is, of course, the nation's federal special education law. It has the timelines, provisions, funding, oversight, funding for parent groups like us so that you can get information at no cost to you. Everything is within this law. So it has clear policies, procedures. So if you have a gut feeling that something doesn't feel right, it might not be, because I.D.E.A very clearly laid out how we are to handle kiddos that have delays and disabilities. So we're happy to get you this information on the I.D.E.A because it makes us stronger advocates as parents. So we're going to briefly just go over the 6 major principles or tenets of the I.D.E.A. So our first is that free and appropriate public education. Number 2 is appropriate evaluation to identify the strengths and needs of the student. The individualized education plan, where we come up with the goals and services and placement to meet that child's strengths and needs in the educational environment. The least restrictive environment. That's today's topic. We are going to be discussing LRE. The least restrictive environment speaks to inclusion, and the I.D.E.A, as well as the Florida statutes, are in alignment that inclusion with non-disabled typical peers is the answer. 5, parental participation, and 6, procedural safeguards. And those are our dispute resolution pathways. And I know a lot of parents are interested to learn more about that. So I'm looking forward to those upcoming topics. But today we were going to be talking about the least restrictive environment. So moving on with our topic. The LRE plays a critical role influencing where a child spends his or her time at school, how the services are provided, and the relationships the child develops within the school and the community. So the least restrictive environment refers to where that child with a disability can receive that appropriate public education designed to meet his or her educational needs alongside peers without disabilities to the maximum extent possible. And so we know that this is starting the continuum at the regular education classroom. This is the least restrictive environment, rather, the most preferable environment for children to be educated in. And even in the case that a child cannot be satisfactorily educated in the mainstream classroom, there are still many, many, many opportunities throughout the school day for, having these kids in the least restrictive environment. So think pep rallies, think, school events, field trips, playground times, PE, special areas that they're being blended in with students that don't have disabilities. So there's lots of places for the provision of LRE. Even if your child is in a standalone ESE classroom, they should still be getting the maximum exposure to their typical non-disabled peers as possible. So, when Congress first passed the Education for All Handicapped Children Act in 1975, it was to make sure that all kids had access to a free and appropriate public education, or FAPE. That was our first tenet of the I.D.E.A. Before that, different states had different laws, and not all children with disabilities could even attend public schools. Not all children with disabilities could even remain in the parents' care, even if the parents wanted the child to stay in the care. I used to teach adults with disabilities, and I had adults that came out of the institution settings, and I talked to the parents, and there was definitely parents who were still involved with their very adult children at this point, right? But a lot of them were not happy about having their child taken out of their care. We're not happy about their educational or lack of educational considerations that were made. And so that was our attempt to rectify that, was the Education for All Handicapped Children's Act of 1975. And that was what has rolled into the I.D.E.A., or the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. The least restrictive environment has been a component since its inception. We do not want children who cannot go to school. We do not want children who are on the very back of the school and never have access. Where are the kids with disabilities? It was like that when I was younger. I was not even aware that we had students with disabilities on our campus. And that's because there was a very deliberate effort to keep it that way. And so we are moving away from that as a society. Disability is natural, inclusion is natural. And we know that this is the best for everybody in society, but especially our students with disabilities. So I am going to read a very dry quote from the I.D.E.A. based on the least restrictive environment. And it's important to do so because we want you to understand the very absolutely firm language of the I.D.E.A. when it comes to inclusion. So, to the maximum extent appropriate, children with disabilities are educated with children who are non-disabled, and special classes, separate schooling, or other removal of children with disabilities from the regular educational environment only occurs if the nature or the severity of the disability is such that the education in regular classes with the use of supplementary aids and services cannot be achieved satisfactorily. Okay. And again, even beyond just the day's classroom setting, looking at all of these other factors. Are the kids is the ESE class getting invited to the pep rally? Are they being invited to try out for sports? Are they encouraged to go to the sports, events? Are they eating in the cafeteria with their peers? Are they playing on the playground with their peers? So there is a lot of levels to that least restrictive environment. So some key terms in LRE. The core of I.D.E.A.'s LRE provisions contain a lot of key terms and phrases that it's important to show you and to let you know the strong language of this law and its absoluteness in inclusion. Um, Consider the specific wording and phrases in the provision: special classes, separate schooling, other removal from the educational environment. And of course, the big one only occurs if. So this again was one of the biggest things that we identified with the Education for All Handicapped Children's Act of 1975, is that we thought, okay, to keep kids in the regular ed environment, they're gonna need supports. And so that's why we have these supports. We have occupational therapists, behaviorists, physical therapists, vision teachers, reading specialists, tutors, counseling service, behaviorists, and on and on and on. We have additional personnel. We can have parapros in the classroom who are there to help look after an individual student or perhaps a couple of students and keep them in the mainstream environment. So consider the meaning of the regular education classroom. So that is long standing. That particular phrasing is very long standing in the I.D.E.A. It actually comes all the way from the Education for All Handicapped Children's Act of 1975. The department explains that the term encompasses regular ed classrooms and other settings in schools such as lunchrooms, playgrounds, and other environments in which children without disabilities participate. The settings in a school where children with disabilities participate are many and varied, and all are considered a part of the regular education environment. So, it all comes down to the wording, satisfactorily achieved. So the only time a child can be removed from the least restrictive environment or the regular mainstream classroom is if we've tried the use of related services, we've tried accommodations, we've tried modifications, we've tried additional personnel, we've tried assistive technology, we have really tried, and we can't guarantee that this child will be satisfactorily educated in that environment. So, what does that actually mean? There isn't a specific standard or level established within the I.D.E.A. for determining what that means to be achieving satisfactory education. However, each child's own IEP is the barometer and the measuring tool that we use to monitor their progress. So if they're meeting their goals, if they're continuing to achieve, then we can say that they are achieving educational satisfactorily. If they are not, then we look at providing other services prior to the removal of that child from those regular mainstream educational environments. So the IEP can be reviewed, revised, enabling the IEP to respond to different concerns about the child's education, about the regular education environment. And in that we can add those services, we can add related services, we can add personnel, we can have that parapro come into the classroom. Perhaps we can have times where that speech language pathologist is coming into the classroom. Um, we want to always serve the child in the least restrictive environment. So, considering supplementary aids and services. So, providing these services is instrumental in reaching kids that have various disabilities within the Florida school systems. What are supplementary aids and services? So it is defined by Section 300.42 of the I.D.E.A. Supplementary aids and services means aids, services, and other supports that are provided in the regular education environment or other education-related settings, as well as in extracurricular and non-academic settings to enable children with disabilities to be educated with non-disabled children to the maximum extent appropriate in accordance with Section 300.114 through 300.116 of the I.D.E.A. So, what are some examples of these supplementary aids and services? So, accommodations are huge. So going through some of the possible accommodations to keep a child in a mainstream environment. Giving them extra time to take tests or to complete classroom assignments, giving shorter or different assignments, providing feedback more frequently than other children, more slow-paced instructions, maybe having small group instruction, providing physical adaptations to the space or to the actual, whatever is being used, maybe removing the pencil and paper and adding a computer or doing, voice to text or providing a note taker or another assistant to the student, equipping the student with a home set of class materials, allowing for additional breaks, preferential seating, digitalized books and classroom materials that can be read out loud to that student, allowing the use of computers for certain assignments, altering the instruction, how it's presented, its pace, its difficulty. So they are intended to be provided in the regular education classroom, other education-related settings, and extracurricular and non-academic settings. So anywhere that that child would need a little help to be able to participate in what all the other kids are doing, then that is a time we need to be looking at the use of accommodations, the use of modifications, the use of additional personnel and supports to teach specific skills and make up specific deficits so that that child can participate in the least restrictive environment. So, suppose a child needs a specific supplementary aid or service that's typically provided in separate environments, but not in the regular education classroom. Does this mean that it doesn't have to be provided, or that the child's placement would be then somewhere other than the regular education environment? No, is the answer to both of those questions. The school system is absolutely responsible for providing the supplementary aids and services that the IEP team determines are appropriate to help develop the child's individual goals and needs. So if you need more information on this, again, please give us a call and we'd be happy to give you some more information on what I.D.E.A has to say about the use of supplementary aids, accommodations, modifications, assistive technology, and additional school personnel. Who decides placement? The IEP team. So if you'll go back to our last tenet, then we were talking about the 6 parts of the IEP. The placement is the very last portion of the IEP. That's because the team and all of the considerations of the IEP prior to that point, their needs, their annual goals, their short-term goals, their related services to meet the goals, the accommodations to meet the goals, how they will be provided. All of that builds through the IEP sections until you just get to the very last part and you say, okay, well, now we have a picture of what the child needs, the goals that are specific to them, who's going to be responsible, what services we're adding in. Where is the best place to give this child all of these services? So you and the IEP team are the ones who are deciding placement. So how do they determine placement? That is determined each and every year. It is based on the child's IEP. We always want it to be as close as possible to the child's home. We want to keep it in that home school, unless sometimes different schools can have different program options available. So we want to keep it as close to the home school and with typical non-disabled peers as possible. But sometimes, there might be a different program that is at the next school over in proximity to the child's home that actually has a better program. So we would only think to move that child away from the home school if it would be to their benefit. And some additional requirements in the law for so they have to be educated in the school that he or she would be attending if non-disabled, again, unless the IEP team decides that given the child's needs for services, this other placement would in fact be preferential to the child's needs. So when discussing placement, the group has to consider that child's unique needs and determine the least restrictive environment for that child based on their needs. So what is least restrictive for each child is based directly on them and the flow of that IEP. It cannot be based on the child's label, their condition, their diagnosis. They cannot be based on the fact that they have an intellectual disability. It cannot be based on a disability program categories, and it cannot be based on the location of staff, funds available at a particular school, or the convenience of the school district. All those things, not factors, not factors. If you are being told that They'd like to provide a service, but they don't have the funding. Big no-no. Big, big no-no. It is their obligation to figure that out, not the kids. So we keep talking about the least restrictive environment, and we know that the least restrictive environment is that regular mainstreamed, or we call it general, sometimes general education classroom. We know that that's the least restrictive environment. But there is a continuum going from the least all the way up to the most restrictive placements. And so to get you and give you an idea of that continuum, number one, the least restrictive environment is, of course, that mainstream classroom that they would otherwise be in even if they didn't have a disability. So going up the ladder is having general education for some subjects, but having either a therapy pull out or pull out into an ESE room for other subjects. Number three would be having special education classes for all subjects. Number four, special school for the whole day. So that's where they're going to a school that is for kids who have a certain disability, or just for kids with disabilities, or for kids with certain mental health needs or behavioral needs. Five is where we go into the residential placement, where now they're not only going to a separate school that is comprised of just individuals that have special needs, but they're actually residing there. So in their free time, they're still not getting access to typical non-disabled peers. And then number six is instruction at home or in a hospital. We call that hospital or homebound. So notifying parents. So prior written notice is something that we're going to keep just talking about over and over and over again, because us as parents, is very critical that we are able to fully participate, that we know what's happening. We know what the school is thinking, that they're following the timelines. So the school has to tell us in written language, understandable to the general public, anytime that we're trying to propose or refusing a parent's request about educational placement. They have to give an explanation of why they're proposing the placement or why they're refusing the parent's proposition of a placement. They have to describe each evaluation procedure, assessment record, or reporting agencies that they used as factors for the decision to either propose or to refuse the parent's proposition for a placement. They have to have a description of other considerations that they looked at and why they decided that those were not the best options for your child. A statement that the parents and the child have certain protections under the I.D.E.A. and that you have rights to procedural safeguards, which are, of course, our alternate dispute resolution pathways, which we are going to be talking about, is our sixth tenet of the I.D.E.A. And then they also have to give you sources where the parents can go to understand I.D.E.A's provisions. And that would be us. You can come to us and we would be happy to make sure that you understand what I.D.E.A has to say about placement or whatever particular situation you and your child might be facing within the special education arena. So you will be asked for written consent for placement and services only once during that initial consent. So this happens after the first IEP is developed. If your child's services or placement are changed later, the school or district has to inform you by providing a prior written notice, but they do not need your permission to make the change. So, in conclusion, determining the child's placement within the least restrictive environment has done each and every year through the IEP. So, that is always always looking to the least restrictive environment. So even if they were served in a special education classroom last year, do they need to be served in that environment this year? If they're being served in the regular education classroom and they were having some pull-out services, but now they're caught up or they're better regulating or whatever the issue was, does that still need to be happening? It needs to be able to flow both ways. We don't need kids locked into ESE or locked into pullouts. So that is a determination that is literally made by reviewing all of the parts of the IEP, which is the most current snapshot of your child's strengths and needs and the goals and the services that are designed to help them meet those goals. So here are two of our wonderful one-pagers on understanding placement and the least restrictive environment. We have a ton of these. FNDUSA.org is a wealth of information. We have free downloadable ESE one-pagers on every topic you could possibly imagine. These are just two that are relating to the current topic that we're talking about right now. But please go there and check it out. We know that you guys are not special educators. We know that you're not lawyers. We know how hard it is to get a grasp on all of this stuff. We were right there where you were just a few years back. And so we are here. We create these resources. We are here to help you understand them, to help you understand I.D.E.A and how it might relate to something that you might be facing with your child right now, whether it's placement or evaluation or the least restrictive environment or what have you. So remember, you are never alone. We are here, parents helping other parents every step of the way at no cost to you parents, as we are funded under the I.D.E.A. There is no evaluation, so I hope that you enjoyed the presentation. I am with Poppin. We are parents offering parents information and networking, and we are the panhandle portion of the Family Network on Disabilities. We also have the Parent Support Network and the Parent Education Network, as well as our sister program, the Family Star, that covers the whole state, but works with families facing more medically complex and health needs, as well as mental and behavioral health needs. And we can be found everywhere. We're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, we're on Blue Sky, we're on TikTok. You can go check out our amazing website, fndusa.org. And you can also just give us a call the old-fashioned way, 1-800-825-5736. You can scan my QR code and you can reach me personally, where I would be happy to help you with any of these concepts that got you peaked, but maybe you need a little bit more information on. Thank you so much for your time. The next segment we will be going into is the importance of parental participation. We fought for it, and we need to know how vital we are in this process. So I hope to catch you for the next one. Thank you for your time. Bye.